the huge impact that seeing our emotions as illnesses has had. I mean, we're kind of like a guinea pig generation, the last couple of generations in the 80s and 90s, where they started, are you sad? Well, just take an antidepressant and you'll be happy. I don't mean to ever split any industry black or white. I think there's so much good there. But the field of psychiatry claimed to be operating under a biopsychosocial model. But in reality, it's like a lot of bio and not much psychosocial not spiritual either. I think we should have a biopsychosocial spiritual model of mental health. And as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, good old Jung always had my back because his stuff just still rang true. Now that people are having these mystical experiences when they aren't even meaning to, but then it drives them into some of this stuff. I knew like a younger generation needed that.
Welcome back to the Mind Meld, you gorgeous sentient sack of stardust. One of the very few things that I am certain you and I, dear listener, have in common is that we want to live a life of fulfillment. We want that soul smooching purpose. But when it comes to actually scratching that soul itch, getting to that place of spiritual catharsis, the path is always foggy at best. A lot of people want to tell you what supposedly worked for them, but you find time and time again that whatever worked for them doesn't work for you. And that's because, my friends, the path is necessarily murky. As Jung said, if the path before you is clear, then you're probably on someone else's. As he also said, your soul demands your folly, not your wisdom, or something to that effect. Two quotes I probably overuse and abuse regularly, but it's because they communicate a throbbingly salient point. That point being, there's only one way through the soul labyrinth, and that's your way. You got to do your best to follow that nebulous whisper. You've got to take a path, even though you're not sure. You've got to fuck up a few, a baker's dozen times, and course correct. Only then will you even have somewhat of a sense that you're on the right path. I know this is resonating with a lot of you. Maybe I'm projecting because that's how it's been for me. That is how you play the labyrinthian game of soul building. But anyway, one of the greatest pleasures of doing these mind melds is getting to connect with other people who are on their own version of that enigmatic path. Enter Mollie Adler, because not only is she on her own version of that path, she's on like the path next door, one that harmonizes very well with my own, because she also recently quit her day job like me. She also hosts a podcast, two actually, Back from the Borderline and Night Night Bitch. She's also heavily influenced by Jung, and we have a lot of similar, I guess, esoteric tastes. Needless to say, this one was a great pleasure. Buttery smooth, a lot of fun, mythopoetic, paranormal wonder nuggets await you. Links for Mollie are in the description. Same for Third Eye Drops. On that note, my friends, we require that you tickle that algorithm with a like, a sub, a comment, a share. To those of you doing so every week, so much love to you. To those of you who come and lurk and watch every week and you don't click those buttons, we need you. We need you, my friends. We're battling AI-powered channels out here with no faces who are cranking out 50 videos a week. But anyway, we have got a back catalog of over 300 mind melds that you will only be able to find wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Pods, Spotify, wherever. And if you are looking for like-minded people who are traveling the labyrinth mentioned above, join us over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. Not only is it the best and most direct way to support these transmissions and your pal Michael P., we do monthly Wonder Gym hangs, often featuring a guest you've heard on the show. We just did one with MJ Dorian of Creative Codex. We also have a book club, a patron-only Discord server. You get rewards like stickers, pins, shirts, and more, but only if you join up at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. And with that, my friends, let's meld minds with the wonderful and whimsical Mollie Adler. Welcome to the Mind Meld, Mollie. This has been a already very nutritious and delicious long pre-chat, but
Yes.
it couldn't be helped because we have a lot of
So many I was like,
similar.
so many aligning interests.
We really do. We really do.
Yeah.
Listeners are aware I quit my day job about a year ago
Mhm.
to attempt this full time. You did the same. I'm not sure how long ago it was for you.
About it was March 2023, so
Oh,
whatever that is now. I think it's like 6 months.
my birthday month. Maybe you quit
Yeah,
for my
yeah,
birthday and you didn't even know it.
there you go. The
Um,
stars aligned. It was
yeah.
a happy day.
Um, yeah. So I actually don't know the history of your creative output in terms of how long you've been doing it. Were you like me where you were sneakily doing it in the background during your day job, or was it like a quit and then pour yourself into this new thing?
It wasn't even a secret. The funny story about my podcast is I have like a really guilty conscience. And so I knew that if I was like slacking off in my job and doing my podcast time that I should be working, not only was that like not going to be good vibes
Yeah, yeah,
for me personally, but also I just knew that I didn't want to put my job at risk.
yeah,
And so I was really genuinely being honorable and working on it like on the weekends and quite frankly, I didn't have time to do my podcast
yeah,
tech. I was working in tech as we talked about before, and I was managing a team and like I even though I was not as passionate about what I did, I really cared about the people I worked with and I took myself like really probably too seriously in my job and so I never really like let my foot off the gas the entire time. So it was but I did end up really physically sick at one point, and I think my acupuncturist literally told me, like, "She's hilarious, and I won't try to do her accent because I won't be able to do her justice, but she's just this tiny little Chinese woman," and she was basically like, "You hate your job, that's why you're sick." And I was like,
mm,
because she asked me how work was, and I just started crying. And,
bad daimon, bad
yeah.
daimon.
Yeah, and it wasn't even anything against my job. Like it was just that my heart wasn't in it.
Yeah,
I loved the people I worked with. I had been with them for like 5 years. And I just knew that I was subconsciously my husband would tell me, um, well, when you're doing podcasting full time, and I was like, yeah, yeah, in the future. And I would just roll my
hmm,
eyes because deep down I think I was like sabotaging myself, like thinking like
yeah,
you could never do this full time. And then it was him that also like made me sit down and like realize you're covering your bills. As soon as you're covering your bills, you need to quit because think about how much more healthier you'd be and also how much happier you'll be when you can dedicate all your time to this that you're actually
hmm,
caring about. So I'm lucky that I have such a supportive partner who's, even though it was a huge pay cut, obviously,
yeah,
I'm happier. And I was terrified when I did it. I remember even after I put in my notice, I was like, fuck, 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 fuck. Like, am I will? So many people around me in tech were losing their jobs at the
yeah.
time. And so I was like, I'm walking away from like health insurance. I still need to get health insurance.
Oh yeah,
And
do that, do that.
oh, I am. It's coming actually right now this month. But yeah, it's just it was hard. It was hard. You know it. It's hard to step
Yeah,
away from the benefits and I mean, whatever we call benefits as millennials these days. And it was hard, but I would
yeah.
never take it back now.
Exactly the same experience for me. Like, I mean, I was at more of a juncture in my job where it was clear. So I was not this the super proactive, hardworking. I was one of those people who's like, I'm in the middle, that's fine. I'm in the bottom middle, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm on the I'm on the naughty list. I get fuck. I guess I better work a little harder. Get
Yeah.
back toward the middle.
Yeah.
Chill out again. I was definitely that person, and my bosses knew that I could be doing more. I could be pushing myself harder. I could be reaching for that next rung, and I
Mhm.
was never doing it. So we
Yeah.
finally had to sit down of like, all right, so tell us
Doing
how you're
your
gonna do.
job is just never
Yeah,
enough, is it? It's such a
no,
fucking joke.
no,
You have to be
especially
pushing extra.
yes, and my job in particular was a like a financial results, like how many billable hours are you logging on this project? How many projects are you doing? What kind of, etc.
Ugh.
So I mean, this had been brewing for a long time, and my close friends and loved ones were encouraging me to, especially the creative ones, like the ones who knew what it meant to be artists or
Yeah.
like do something creative for a living.
Yeah.
They would always put the bug in my ear and be
Yep.
like when it's going to
When?
be enough money saved? When is it going to be enough this?
Yeah.
When? And
That's what Zaz was saying to me. Yep.
that's when, and in that moment when my boss was asking me, like I like something in me knew, like, this is the time when you say no. This is the time when you say, you know what? I don't
Yeah.
I don't wanna do any of those things. I don't wanna get promoted. I don't wanna switch
Oh,
roles. I don't
shit.
wanna do
You
this.
said that?
Yeah, yeah,
Good for you. How
yeah.
did that feel?
Scary as fuck. I mean, it felt
Fuck,
like
I bet that felt
that
so good.
it felt like it did, but it was like the kind of like it's definitely like the feeling that comes from like a breakup or like a something where like there's you've already sort of done all the mental math where you're like, this needs to happen, but it's going to hurt a lot. It's going to hurt like all like it's not just going to be like a clean rip off the band-aid and look, I
Yeah.
have a fully healed wound underneath. It's going to be like oh, this is going to hurt and it's
Yeah.
going to send me into some kind of spiral, but it
Spiral.
needs
Yeah,
to
you're gonna
happen.
regret it. You're gonna
Yeah,
say, "Oh, fuck, should I have done that?" Yeah,
right.
no, but now I'm sure you're like, "Thank God I did it."
It felt like fully stepping into I just thought of this analogy because I'm assuming it's like one that you're familiar with is like you know that tower that Jung built, the Bollinger Tower.
Mhm.
As I understand it, he actually took up bricklaying as a way to not be fully consumed by the personality
Thoughts.
too, as he called it, his inner realm and all these things. Like he needed a tactile grounding
Mhm.
thing to do. And I in an opposite way sort of felt like I had been building this like structure in the background that was fully designed for me to just like ready for me to step into it. And that's kind of what it felt like, but it still felt very strange. You know, it didn't feel like I didn't know what to do with myself. Did you have that experience where you'd wake up and like, yeah, you had this to work on and that to work on, but because there's no one telling you like, oh, now you got to do this and now you got to do that. It's just you're that weird free fall space of
Yes.
deciding everything for yourself is a very interesting,
It
weird feeling.
it's very weird, and for me, what I've had to battle with is, like, the perfectionism and the overworking because I'm the
Mhm.
person that's, like now I think it made me go into more of a overwork. I'm still now I'm self-correcting that now because it's only been 6 months, and I think I, like don't get me wrong, I've put out a lot of content. I started a second podcast,
Yeah.
like, I'm putting out so much content, and I think I part of me I started that second esoteric podcast because I needed something that wasn't paying me, like I needed to, because Back from the Borderline was paying all my bills now. And I feel like I have a responsibility to my listeners. And don't get me wrong, I love that because my
Mhm.
subscribers fully support me. But Night Bitch was really fun because I was like, I need just like a full creative outlet, like something that I
Yeah.
can feel like I'm being an artist because I still struggle with thinking like, "Oh no, all my subscribers are gonna leave, and then I'm gonna have to go get a tech job again." Like, I still have
Yeah.
those thoughts all the time. I wish I could say that I'm over it, but it's getting less frequent.
Yeah. Well, you're obviously killing it. I mean, the it takes people so long to get to a place, especially with a podcast where you can even cover your bills. Like for me, I was doing it
Yeah,
for 5 or 6 years and like it was all like I told you I kind of hit this plateau and I'm like I I know how much work I'm putting in and what it takes and I
yeah,
sort of saw what even just abstractly, you sort of see what it would take to go to the next
yeah,
level. And I remember just viscerally being confronted with the idea of this is full time. This next rung is full time. Like there's
yeah,
nothing you've put out 200 whatever episodes. You
yeah.
know what it takes.
You're
Like
a podcaster now,
yeah,
right?
like if
Like
you want to go, it's you got to send the signals to yourself,
yeah.
the universe, the daimon, God, whatever you want to
Mhm,
call it,
mhm.
if you want that next thing. And that's what it felt like for me. And that's what it turned out to be. But we also bond over a lot more than just that. Like I didn't even know that about
Yeah.
you so recently. Um, other than your top notch meme selection,
Thank
uh,
you.
we also bond a lot over Jung around
Yes.
esoteric topics. It seems. What was it about? Let's just start with Jung because he's a portal to everything. Like he's a portal to literally every idea that you can conceive of when it comes to philosophy,
Mhm.
psychology, esotericism, paranormal.
Mhm.
What was your introduction to Jung and what really pulled you in about his thought?
I think what I liked about Jung is that he combines psychoanalysis, which I think has a lot there. Like I think there's a lot there for us to understand ourselves. And then he brings in spiritual elements to that. And
Yeah.
to me, he feels like a balanced version of those things. And coming out of like me getting kind of thrown back into my spiritual studies, like I think I found myself down like a woo-woo rabbit hole. Like I first fell across like Abraham Hicks. And I'm not saying Abraham Hicks is woo-woo. I think that like no shade, no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade, as my favorite drag queen says. But like it's just very abundance mindset stuff,
Right.
right? It's the stuff, it's the very first rabbit hole that you go down. And I think that I got take we were talking about YouTube algorithms, like
Yeah,
spiritual
yeah.
YouTube algorithms
Yep.
before. I think there's a YouTube spiritual algorithm that you can go down and like lose your mind a little
Oh
bit.
yeah.
It's very red book.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
but not great, like not going in the right directions at all and really just kind of getting overinflated in your ego and doing a lot of spiritual bypassing. And so then when I found out about Jung and then the work of other Jungian analysts, I thought, okay, here are like really grounded people, but also it was all about transformation, which for me sounded very true, like and felt true.
Yeah.
Whereas it didn't have a lot of like the more charlatan aspects that I was seeing popping up on Instagram. Because when I really started my spiritual awakening, like however you want to call that, when I really started kind of feeling called back to this stuff again, it was the height of when people were selling like their courses and, like
Yeah.
girls in their 20s are claiming to like be able to help
Yeah.
you integrate your shadow and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which they have everybody out there. I think a lot of them have really good intentions, but I think we're in a really weird space. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I found solace in Jungian depth psychology because I felt safe there. I feel like I'm growing and I'm also still staying like grounded.
Yeah. Do you know James McRae or follow him? Words
Yes,
or
I'm having
Vibrations?
coffee with him and
Oh,
Bob
perfect.
Peck
Oh,
like
yeah,
next
yeah,
week.
awesome. Yeah,
Literally.
they're some of my, IRL homies, and,
That's so cool. I'm
yeah,
excited to meet both
they're
of
good
them in person.
people.
I just interviewed Bob, but
Yeah, they're good people, they're good people.
yeah.
Um, so anyway, that reminded me, I remember, James at some point posted a meme to the effect of, uh, "God give me the confidence of a 25-year-old life coach," or something like that,
Yeah,
which is just like,
especially if she's renting a Airbnb in Joshua Tree.
yeah, she got that sick hat collection,
Yeah, I was
just
gonna say
ready
she's
to
definitely got the hat,
yeah,
the what are even those hats? Like a Panama
I don't
hat,
know.
that's what they're called, I
I
think.
don't know, but if you're
Everyone can see her in their mind's eye
yeah,
right now anyways.
if you're in the Austin area, which it sounds like you are, you'll find them if you want. It's like
They're there, and
it's
they're doing
the
breathwork ceremonies.
it's the headwear version of that phrase that's like, "When the student is ready, the master will appear. When the head is ready, the hat will
The
appear." And
Panama hat will appear.
James has some. He'll
But
give
the
you the
thing is,
details.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I really love him. I followed his page for so long. I feel like anybody who dips their toe in spiritual meme land will come across words or vibrations.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's one of the few people who's a legitimately good dude. He's not living in a realm of delusion, very, very down to earth, good guy. But,
Shout out James.
yeah, shout out James. But, yeah, so I completely am with you on that. Like, that is definitely one of the appeals of Jung for me
Yeah.
is knowing that he's really the archetypal I came through the rigors of science. I jumped through all the hoops. I went to great universities, and I still had that longing. I still had that spiritual hole. I still needed to figure things out.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're aware of his schism with Freud and his kind of
Mhm.
dark night of the soul that led to him writing what later became the Red Book. And then
What
that
a
being
trip.
right, this really like transformative
Yeah.
uh, you know, number of years, however many years it was, that led to him becoming this person we know now as this great synthesizer,
And he
this
had to
great
go through that psychosis.
right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he includes it as a really important part of his development that allowed him to help people, not something that he felt made him crazy or but he had to integrate the crazy.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we all need that, and we all need
Yeah.
to figure out what that means for us, but it's one of those things where I think everybody thinks they're somewhere in the process of that. Like,
Mhm.
they think or they imagine that some no, it's kinda happening right now, but at some point, it's really going to happen. But
Yep.
sadly, I think what's more likely for most people is that eventually they're gonna have one of the tragedies that life guarantees you
Yep.
happen to them, whether it's
Yep.
somebody passing away or just whatever it is, a health thing, and it's all gonna the unconscious, the hidden fears, all that stuff is gonna explode out in a
Yep.
way that is not you can't deal with it. You can't deal with it logically. You can't deal with it through investigating the unconscious and dreams and active imagination or taking a psychedelic. It's like it's all too much too fast, and you just sort of have to like hold on while the explosion is like, waving your body like a cartoon character, and you're just
That's my
trying.
biggest fear right there
Yeah.
is, like, being that person that has ignored all of this stuff until it's D-Day, like,
Yeah.
like, on whatever
Mhm.
D-Day means. My grandfather, I won't go into too much detail because I don't know what you do, like, trigger warnings. Long story short, my grandfather took his own life,
Oh, wow.
when he was put into a nursing home, basically drove home, and that was that, and it was a failed attempt, and so my family, my uncle found him there, and still he went and passed away in hospice, and still to this day, my entire, like, mother's side of the family don't talk about that. They just say,
Wow.
"My grandpa fell off a ladder," right? And that right there, I tell that story because I speaking out the truth is so important, and speaking about
Yeah.
what actually happened is important, and grieving what actually happened is important because it's the constipation of that truth that causes all of that repressed psychic material to make people sick and it was made me sick. And so unfortunately I've had to kind of come out from that shadow of that dysfunctional aspect of my family, which we all have. I love my family, and I think it's also overcoming the ambivalence of that, like, we can love and be really sad and disappointed with people at the same time, but, I that's one thing is, like, I just can't stand not facing these big important things and shoving them, down. It's, like, something that really viscerally
Yeah.
upsets me.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, and you're obviously setting an example on multiple fronts with that kind of stuff. Like, clearly that seems to be a big part of your show and probably why it
Huge.
resonates so much is, like, you're willing to be vulnerable in a way. Also, like, there's a line with vulnerability where it starts to get very, like, self-importance and
100%.
masturbatory, and that's one of those things that I'm always a little bit allergic to, but you do a great job of not taking it to that level and keeping it very, I think, medicinal for other people, and, like, giving that feeling of creating a safe space rather than like like a victim celebrating kind of space or
Completely, and because
something.
I'm right, thank you for that, and it's because I take very seriously doing my own work, and I share because number 1, like, I who am I? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, so who am I other than someone with lived experience, right? And not only that, I'm someone who's had to learn lessons the hard way, throughout my
Mhm.
life, and so and I too many creators speak from a place of being up here,
Right.
and I like to speak as somebody who's really been, I mean, I talk about Hot Mess Molly all the time on the podcast because my premium subscribers will laugh at that because I always say it. I'm like, well, back Hot Mess Molly would do this because
Mhm.
I was a completely unaware version of myself. And thinking back on the pain that I put people through, like psychologically mostly, like just I broke so many people's hearts. I broke my own heart, and um I didn't want to die not having tried to be a better version of myself, that's not
Yeah.
run by all these complexes. So what reading Jung and hearing about complexes, I was just like,
Yeah.
and re-traumatization and all these things, I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. That's why I was like, fuck disorder and dysfunction labels. Like, don't, they're just telling me that something is wrong inside. But in reality, I'm trying to remove all of this stuff that was thrown onto me. And then I can find out what's under there, And
Yeah.
that's why I like Jung so much.
Yeah. Let's talk about complexes because that's one
Yeah.
of those topics that I have not directly covered or made a video on, or even myself really dove super deeply into. But it's
Hmm.
such a but it is where a lot of these things that we now call pathology, I think, originate in a lot of
Yep.
cases, is these unconscious sort of
They're
it,
like scripts.
yeah, like these scripts or these like locuses of like
I just looked it
patterned.
up, and the first
Yeah,
thing that happened, it's like Jung describes a complex as a node
right,
in
a
the
node, yeah.
unconscious and imagined as a knot of unconscious feelings and beliefs. And I'm like, yeah, that's so fucking true. Because
Yeah,
if you think about that, when you have something that's like wadded up inside you, like things can't flow through it, right? It's just,
yep,
and visually, that is very appealing to me because that's how I felt. I felt like I was just a mess of my generational family patterns that I was playing out. And when you really look at that and you see like how much you're just like parroting back and like doing the same shit that your parents did, and
yep.
but then trying to take the moral high ground and say they fucked you up and somehow you're not doing that
Yeah, yeah,
too. Oh my god, like once you start really figuring that out, it can be, that's why you have to be in a good place because that's when people really
yeah.
can start having really dark, deep feelings. You have to get through that. But that's why Jung is helpful too because he's a good guide through that. He went through it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I was listening to your pod with Hollis, and he had a
Mhm.
phrase that he was using that seemed very akin to um, complexes. I think the word script might have been in
Fuck.
there.
Yeah, it's at
Um,
the tip of my tongue as well. It's been a
did I
while
write
since I
it
listened to that
down?
one.
But yeah, he has some word to that effect of
Mhm.
essentially you. This is one of the things about Jung that's not the most practical is sometimes you hear something like a node in the
I
unconscious and
know.
you're like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean?
Yeah.
But what you look at, okay, and this kind of ties back into Hollis's point too, I think, is that you look at the external outgrowth of what it is in terms of the pattern, right? In terms of the what is the thing I'm doing over and over again that leads to this outcome or buttresses this negative habit or behavior, and then that leads you back to the complex and it's like, oh fuck, that's why I'm doing it. And it's
Yeah.
not even, and whenever I'm talking about these things, I never want it to seem like it's something you address and now it's gone. Like
You're
it's
aware of
like
it though.
going to the
That's the
gym or
thing.
something. Yeah, it's
Yep.
like you have to go work on it all the time. You have to
None
confront
of
it
my
all the time.
complexes are gone yet. Like, the thing is
Right.
they still pop up, but the thing is that now, like, for example, if I, like, snap at my husband or something, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, that was not what I meant to say," right? Like, I'm doing that thing again because he and I mean, we have talked about this ad nauseum about both of our, like, complexes.
Hmm.
So we're just aware of what each other's complexes are, and so therefore, like, automatically stuff that used to spiral into conflict in my, like, interactions with the outer world, they don't do it as much because I can catch it really quick, but man, I'm still wired very spicy. Like, I'm I'm, like, ready to go at any moment, but
Yeah.
which is served me in the past, but I'm having to learn how to like rein it in.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. And
Mhm.
I still have these little, for me, I have a lot of like puer tendencies. I have a lot of like,
Yeah.
and that gets exacerbated when you're full time on your own, like
Yes.
nobody telling you when to do what to do. Other than I do have these guidelines I take seriously, like something, a piece of content will go out every Wednesday, come hell or high water. Like there's no
Yeah.
fucking excuse. Like there, that kind of
That
stuff.
is so important, isn't it,
Yeah.
to have, like, one I have the same, where it's
Yeah.
just
Right.
like I've and also if I miss one, I know it's all downhill from there, so I have
Right.
to, like, hit that deadline, like
Yep. Yep, and sometimes
Yep.
I'll find myself in that uncomfortable place of like, "Oh, man, I'm, like, putting a huge demand on myself," and then sometimes just to remind myself of your bar, like, you've kinda set your own bar for what hard work is, and sometimes
Yeah.
you need, like, that and I believe me, I'm not like a hustle culture, like David Goggins, like,
No.
get
It's like
out there and
keeping
run
your word to
4,000 miles,
yourself.
but sometimes
Yeah.
I do wanna remind like, you don't even fucking do you even remember what it means to just, like, want this so bad that you'll, like, sit at the computer for 12 hours and just fucking
Yeah.
go hard? Because you gotta remember that thirst to a degree if you want to it's like the Steven Pressfield sort of, I'm assuming you've probably come across War of Art or read War oh my god, you would love it.
The
You would
Art
love
of
it so mu
War?
War of Art, War of Art. So Art
Oh,
of
I'm
War
like,
is the
there's another different book.
yeah, uh, Art of War is that Sun Tzu
Yeah, I was
famous
like, I've
book.
definitely never that talk about heavy reading.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
I haven't
thick
read
one.
that. I haven't read that either. But, no, Steven Pressfield is an author, and he has a book called The War of Art, and it's sort of the creative grind, but he looks at it from a
Interesting.
very both practical and mythopoetic lens because for instance, he says the invocation of the muse from the beginning of the Odyssey every single time he sits down. Like he literally says a little prayer to the
Wow.
muse. And on one
I'm gonna
hand,
have to
that's
steal
very
that tactic. That's so
it's so cool,
dramatic. I
right?
love
It's
it.
so
So
cool.
extra.
It's so cool.
I love that.
But so on one hand, that's like, wow, very mythopoetic, very
Mm.
whatever. But then he follows that up with the muse loves a blue collar worker. Like she loves it when you sit down and you fucking do it every day and she knows you're going to be there and she knows you're
Yeah.
open to her channel and you're not going to be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I just don't feel like it today." Like
It reminds me of have you
there's
read,
yeah.
Julie Cameron? The what's it? It's like
Mm-mm.
the, art of is it the art of spiritual no, creative something, whatever. There's this book and sh this woman's a pretty famous this book has been, like, released a million different times. She says you should do your morning pages. That's her whole shtick,
Mm,
is that, like, you sit down and no matter what, you write 5 pages, and that if you keep showing up and you just, like if all you have to write is just, "I don't have anything to write, I don't have anything to write," for 5
yeah,
pages, that you will eventually like the muse will start coming through you. That's like her whole but it just goes back to like what we were saying in our intro chat that all these things, they're just like the same teachings, but wrapped up in different packaging. But
right.
you have to show up. You have to like constantly show up, even if it's not what you think is your best episode. It's better to put something out there, right? For people.
Yeah, you have to, and you also never know. Like you develop an instinct and an intuition for sure when you kind of know like "Ugh, this one doesn't feel great, but you will surprise yourself every now and then. Like
Yes,
sometimes you will put something out and you're just like, how is this in my like top 5 ever? Like I do
I
have
know.
a couple episodes that to this day I look back and I'm like, I don't know why this one. I've had this person on like 10 times and this is
But
like
this
their
just
sixth
blew up.
appearance and there's like something about this one. Um, so yeah, that's one thing, and two, it's just you become I don't know how to phrase this without it's gonna sound cheesy no matter how I linguistically skin this cat. It's like you become who you are through those kinds of decisions. Like, if there's a moment where you hit a juncture and you find yourself in that weird place of either making an excuse or following through, if you multiply that decision by 100 times and 95 times you followed through, that's a very different sum than if you followed through 50 times or if you followed
Yeah.
through 20 times. And that really is, and this is what no one wants to hear about creativity. To your point, everyone jumps to the manifestation. What's the
Yeah.
hack? What's the way around?
And
How do I get
follow when you're inspired. Do when
right?
you're inspired, right?
And
And,
every single time, it's like, "No, you
yep,
do it just like Carl Jung did. You put
yeah,
one brick down, and
yep,
then another brick down, and then you have a
yep,
tower. There's no other
yep.
way to do it."
No, it's true. I wish that that weren't the case, or maybe I don't, but because sometimes it does. Like, I remember the first day I sat down after I quit my job and I was like, "Oh, I really don't feel like writing this, like, Substack
Yeah,
post," and then I go, "Molly, like, you're doing what you love, like, you don't have a boss anymore, like, come on." And so
right.
I always tell myself that I'll do like 15 there's that trick. It's like a productivity hack, but
Yeah,
I don't like the hustle stuff either, but it's just do it for 15 minutes. And then if you feel like you can do another 15 minutes, set the timer
yeah,
again, and then be done. You did a little bit, but half the time you'll keep going because you'll be
right.
in the flow. And so I do that kind of stuff with myself a lot because I think I have a lot of self-sabotagey tendencies
Me
inside of
too.
me,
Yep.
big time, and so I constantly have to fight against them because I'm always like, "Oh, but I think I would rather just, like, read my book. I'd rather just read another PDF," like, I always have to learn more before I can make the content about it, and I'm like, "No, you're just trying to not fucking actually go do the thing. You wanna,
Yeah.
like, intellectually masturbate about the thing."
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. I I think that's my biggest, I don't know if complex is the right word, but that
It's a thing.
the gravity of the puer, of the, like,
Yeah.
disappear into a game or disappear into a
Yep.
million different videos or a book or
And tell
whatever.
yourself, I'm doing self-care."
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I do that. I do that all the
I
time.
do it all the
And
time
I
too.
don't mean to sound like I always do the thing, I always follow through.
Yeah.
In truth, I follow through often, but I often take a lot of little, if I'm shooting the free throw, I have a
Yeah.
very long ritual before the ball leaves my
Uh-huh.
hand. I'm
Same.
doing all these different, like, "Oh, maybe I'll do a little bit of this today. Maybe I'll do a little bit of that."
Yep.
And then sooner or later that voice is just like, "What are you doing?" Like,
It's always last minute for me.
yeah,
My husband's laughing at
same,
me all the time because
same.
I'll never miss the deadline, but I will
Yeah,
leave it until the last fucking second, and then I get that but I always get that burst of productivity that gets me through. So I'm like and we were talking about it the other day. I'm like, "I think" he's like, "I think that's just the way that you work, and maybe that's okay." And I'm going,
yeah.
"Yeah." Because that normally I'd beat myself up, but now I'm just going, "Okay, that's I always get it done. So
I'm
why am
talking
I
to
just gonna
myself.
stress?"
I'm talking to myself right now. I'm just
Yeah,
talking to myself. I
right? Same, same.
100%. That's exactly how it is for me too.
Yeah.
Um, and then so we can easily, I think, use Jung as the through line probably to this whole conversation.
He's
But
easy to
then,
do that with,
right, yeah.
basically.
But then what that makes me think of, in terms of, I guess we can almost just like use his biography too, is that after he had the Red Book years or whatever, and he moved on to his next big fascination, which for him was archetypally speaking was alchemy, and him realizing that this is really the archetype of psychical transformation that he's been looking for, and he just never did a deep enough dive into it because he didn't think there was um, anything coherent enough. He didn't think there was like a real underlying method until he realized, oh, of course there is. This is all about transformation. This is all about taking
Mhm.
prima materia, a base material, and sublimating it into something sacred. And that's exactly what individuation is. And
Yep.
there's this theme also that runs throughout Jung's thought and fascinations that alchemy again is sort of just this glimmering node of, which is there's something fundamentally absurd about trying to do something mundane as if it's sacred, because there's no way that, this podcast or sitting down at a computer or any of these mundane things we do in and of themselves can scratch the soul itch, can really make you feel like, oh, this is the exact catharsis I was looking for. But there is some kind of way that doing any kind of mundane verb, when backed by that spirit, sort of feeds it just a little bit and just a little bit. And then over time, you're just like dripping these life giving waters back into your psyche. And when did you know that for you, like the creative project that you have, when did you
Mhm.
know for you that that was going to actually serve that function to some degree? Was it apparent right away, or did it take some time for it to connect?
No, it definitely took time because I started off my podcast really like in a different direction. Like
Mm,
I started talking about borderline personality disorder, you know, like my first podcast. And as I applied my cuz I thought, "Hey, I identify with a lot of these symptoms. I'm suffering right now." But I always just knew that I had like a lot going on and I wanted to
right.
talk about it and I didn't have anyone to talk about it with. So I explored my podcast through that lens and then I started realizing that people were just identifying with some of the emotions I was going through and I thought then I started researching about psychiatric just the history of psychiatry and the
Mhm.
medical model of mental health and just the huge impact that seeing our emotions as illnesses has had on we're kind of like a guinea pig generation, the last couple of generations, right? Like it only
Yeah.
really started in the 80s and 90s where they started saw the little Cymbalta guy, like, "Are you sad? Well, just take an antidepressant and you'll be
Yeah.
happy." And then the sad little ball guy is happy. And I always say on my podcast, I'm right in the middle of the road. I've had certain medications that I've taken in the past that have like gotten me through a very dark period because I
Yeah.
was having panic attacks. And so I don't mean to ever split any industry black or white. I think there's so much good there, but the field of psychiatry and the medical spaces in the West claim to be operating under a biopsychosocial model, but in reality, it's like a lot of bio and not much psychosocial
Yeah, what
and
yeah.
not spiritual either. I think we should have a biopsychosocial spiritual model
Mhm.
of mental health in the United States. And so I became very, I went down that rabbit hole. And as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, again, good old Jung always had my back because his stuff just still rang true. It's aged really well, and now that people are psychedelics are becoming more accessible, people are having
Yeah.
these mystical experiences when they aren't even meaning to, but then it drives them into some of this stuff. And I guess I wanted to make content and blend Jung up in my smoothie, obviously and not so obviously, because I knew like a younger generation needed that. And I felt as I was to answer your question, as I was absorbing myself in all of this content, I was like life was easier to deal with. Like and also things made more sense. The questions didn't feel so painful
Mhm.
and life just had like a little more color and I was going not easier like by any means. It was easier because I
Yeah.
was making my own life less miserable, I think. But then that was it, is that it was just slowly over time and then receiving voicemails and emails from my listeners, which I play lots of
Right.
voicemails where they're saying this stuff has like opened their mind. And I went, oh, there's power in this. Cause I
Oh,
never
yeah.
claimed to have created any of these things myself. I always give credit to the giants before me, but just exposing people to this information goes to show how starved we are for it.
Mhm. 100%. Yeah, I get that exact same kind of catharsis, knowing that I'm at least doing my best to spread these little portals, like these little
Yeah.
Mario warp tubes to like these deep new worlds of exploration.
Yes.
Like that is really important. But I will say that if I'm being honest with myself, I'm very aware of the fact that purveying this stuff does not mean I'm doing the work. Like
Oh,
purveying these
fuck
ideas
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean I or anybody else who's talking
Nope.
about this shit is really doing what they're talking about. And that's something that I would say in the last 6 months, I've been feeling an increased pull to, not saying I would abandon the projection of the stuff, but because I can't. Like I really need to keep going for practical living purposes at this point. Um, but I'm starting to feel more like, not only do I feel on some level, I guess, a little bit fraudulent because I don't have any kind of like, this is my practice. I'm always doing inner work at this time on the calendar. You
Mhm.
know, I do feel like I need that. And I'm struggling to decide what I want that to be. And I
Hmm.
think one of the things I might have mentioned before we started recording is what map you decide to use ends up being a very consequential thing. You know, if you're that's one of the reasons I like the Jungian. I'm touching a book. It looks like I'm probably just like reaching towards
Mhm.
something, but um, I have Inner Work by Robert Johnson over here because we just
Mm,
did the patron book club
classic.
thing. Yeah, and that is such a great for anybody who's feeling this way. Read that book because it's a
Yeah.
non-dogmatic path to do exactly
It's
what I'm
so
describing.
good. It's good.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's really good.
It's on Audible too, which I have it on Audible,
Yep.
and it's such a good Audible listen.
Well, I have
A good
physical
walk.
and
Uh,
Audible. I
oh,
have
look at
physical and
you.
Audible.
He you win. You win this
uh,
round.
but yeah, so that is something that I'm going to do more of. But there's still, even on top of that, something else I feel like I need, which is something that is expressly spiritual, where it's like it's not me working on myself. It's not me working on my psyche or even
Yeah.
whatever. Like I'm feeling the need to connect up with the mystery more directly. And historically, psychedelics have been a way for me to do that. Meditation, kind of here and there, has been a way for
Mhm.
me to do that. But I feel more like I want something else. And I just have this weird feeling like I'm not sure if it exists. I'm not sure if that
Mm.
thing I'm looking for exists. Do you ever have that kind of a feeling?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one of the things I relate to you is like, I need to be better about this. Like I
Yeah.
interviewed think it was either, Steven Eisenstadt in the James Hollis interview, I can't remember which, but basically one of them told me that Marion Woodman expected that any analysand who would do, analysis with her would have to do a minimum of 1 hour of inner work a day, like,
Yeah. I
no
think it was Hollis.
excuses.
I think it was
Yeah,
Hollis. Yeah.
I think it was his interview, and, I was just like, "Holy shit," because sometimes I even have to I have a reminder in my phone that says, like, meditate for 10 minutes, like, no excuses, like, no fucking excuses. And, like, do you know how many times I'm just like, ignore? Like, it's just it's a hot mess. But what I realize is I'm trying to be a little more fluid with how I approach it because
Mhm.
I do have the tendency to say, I need to, then I realize I'm just slipping into like critical inner parent mode yet again. Like I'm always policing myself so much already. And so I'm going, what if I just let myself just like doodle in my journal for a second? Or what if I
Yeah.
just like, something that's completely whatever? Or if I just like, if I feel like stretching, I just like sit down and stretch like right there, like instead of forcing myself to like sit down and meditate or like listen to this book or something, I'm trying to be a bit more free. And I just did an interview with Steven Eisenstadt. He's the founder of the Pacifica Graduate
Oh,
University.
yeah, yeah, that's why that name sounds familiar. Yeah, yeah.
He's he's great. He just did this book called, The Imagination Matrix. He just released it this month, and he calls his active imagination technique the dig because he basically sits down and, like, plays music, and every morning he just gets his journal out and he, like, goes into his imagination and just, like, writes about what he is hearing and,
Mhm.
like, seeing, and I tried that a couple of times this last week, and I found it really I don't ever like the words "it works" or, like, I
Right.
hate using any of those kind of words. I found it to be illuminating. I found it to be, uh something that I'm gonna keep trying to do because I feel like it helps me not put any measurements on it. I just do it for however long I feel like I want to do it, but it's just like you said, I'm gonna try to be consistent enough about it to where things can come through if they need to. So that's what I'm doing, and trying so hard to just, like, cut back on, like, the policing of myself because it's so easy for me to think that, like, I'm not doing enough even though, like, this is my whole fucking job, like,
Right.
I can't remember where I read it the other day. It was definitely one of the millions of books I'm digesting at the moment, like piecemeal. But
Right.
somebody
Yeah.
somebody in there wrote that like it's good, like relax basically. You also as a spiritual person, you also need to like just shoot the shit, like watch the cheesy show, like
Yeah.
do the thing and turn your brain off for a minute. Like it's okay if you do that, and it's actually you should do that.
Yeah. We're multidimensional beings for sure.
Yeah.
You know, you really are like that's another thing Lawrence Hillman said to me when he was talking about the thing with the archetypes in your birth chart is he's like when you're a trained eye and you look at somebody's chart. And by the way, I know there's mixed feelings on astrology out there and blah blah blah. I have those mixed feelings myself. But
Mhm.
anyway, according to somebody who's like been a lifelong practitioner of this archetypal theory, he looks at that and he's like, what I look at or what I see when I look at that is I see actors playing roles, and I ask myself, what roles are those actors playing? Because you not only have the actors, but you have the roles in terms of like,
Mhm.
where are the archetypes positioned, et cetera, et cetera. But whether you take stock in that specifically or not, it the logic stands that we're not just one thing. Like there is no unified Molly except for on the outside. There's no unified Michael except for on the inside. There's all of these competing
Mhm.
voices, and that can be incredibly confusing when you're not trained to think that way. You think, well, I think this, but I also think that. I think that, but I also have
It's how
this
people have,
suspicion. And
like, a spiritual psychosis, you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like, literally, it's very easy for your psyche to completely disintegrate. That's why
right.
it's so important to have, like, other people in your life that are kind of studying these things that you can kind of talk to them about. Like, I have certain people that I know have, like, really done some serious reading and inner work, and I ground myself in, like, conversations with those people because it's something that's like Jung. Look, he almost lost
Yeah,
his whole ass mind doing the Red
right.
Book because he was who's to say that that isn't also what some people need to do? Maybe we need to lose it a little bit.
Yeah, there's this idea of oh man, I wish I could remember the Greek word. Here I am again forgetting the cool flex
I think
word
we can forgive you.
that
It's
I specifically was
okay.
like, make sure you remember this. But essentially it means like divine madness, and that there's like a kind of wisdom you can only get by
Mhm.
going into that state of mind where you have completely blown up your reference point for what is normal and you've gone out of your mind.
It's
And then
very
in
Dante-esque.
yeah, right. It's very Dante-esque, and it's
Mhm.
very um and I do think those catabolic or like catabasis type
Uh-huh.
things where you get lost in
You
the
know that's what Carl Jung memes Sarah Mergen, her Patreon is called, uh, that.
I just
Can
followed her the other
Yes.
day. I wasn't even aware of her page, and then I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
cool, I'm gonna steal some memes from this page." And then I saw that she had a catabasis, anabasis
Yes.
theme, and I'm like, "Ooh, now I'm actually interested beyond the memes because
She is very, very, very I mean, I think, again, that's another person that I bet you guys would have a great conversation. She loves she knows this stuff, like, in and out.
awesome." Yeah.
She scripts, like, 50, 50 pages for her episodes
Holy
on pa
shit.
she's she's hardcore, yeah.
It's
She's like a very
hardcore, yeah.
Charlie Always Sunny meme.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, you kinda have to be, like, if you're
You do.
and that's I think that's the sort of the cash value of those experiences is when you do come back, either you have to be like, "Whoa, I was just out of my mind there." But if you're trying to actually extract some kind of nugget, you do need to do that kind of
You
more
have to.
asynchronous kind of
Yep.
free association, tying ideas together. And while, yeah, that is a tightrope that you could go psychotic
Yeah,
walking, like falling off the tightrope could be psychosis. On the other hand, that's exactly what the red book is going down into
precisely.
those like the storm of psychic
Mhm.
forces and then coming out with something. And that's what a powerful psychedelic experience is. That's what all of
Yeah.
these things are. Like you kind of have to bring yourself close to the fire to find a new way of seeing, to navigate the chapel perilous in a new way. And
I'll
there's
tell you
definitely something
something
to that. Yeah.
fascinating. My nephew, he's only I'll have to send him this. Shout out Kasten. He's like 22. I mean, he'll kill me for saying he's a baby, but he's like very young, yeah. And like
Oh yeah.
he told me the other like I can't remember, it was a few months ago, but he said that he's like, "Oh yeah, so we were talking about psychedelics again." I'm talking to a 22-year-old living in Wyoming, right? Who's done psychedelics. And I asked him what he did, and he did DMT. And I was like, damn, Kasten,
Okay. Okay.
that's hardcore. And I'm telling you, when I asked him what his experience was like, he just said, yeah, basically the vibe was this is me paraphrasing massively because he explained in detail what his experience was very articulately. And he said that he basically got a sense that everything is connected. And it was very like he had some scary times during that experience, but he came out of it and it was a positive experience for him. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm talking to my nephew who lives in Wyoming, who just casually had a DMT experience. He's not a serious spiritual practitioner any by any means, but
Yeah.
that experience imparted a a feeling to him that he's connected to everything. And I'm going, that's pretty fucking amazing, you
Yeah.
know? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying bad trips can't happen. In my interview with Sarah, we talk about how
Oh
a bad
yeah.
acid trip really took some psychological years off for her. And I had a similar very bad trip when I was 16 on weed that I swear was like sprayed with something, where I had a very, very bad experience where I touched nothing for years.
Wow.
But but also I hadn't done any inner work at that point. So now it's interesting to watch that, and I'm going like, maybe those were all of the things that I needed to be, that were like raging for my attention now, you know? So I
Yeah.
have an interesting way of looking back on that, but find it fascinating to see the people that are coming up in generations behind us that are, they're so much just more open to this stuff. And they're like, yeah, obviously everything's connected. And I'm like, sick. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and being able to touch that feeling, not intellectually, but knowing it, like through a
Yeah,
sense of direct interfacing with it, that is such a giant difference maker. Like
it is.
we could, we could sit here and talk about it, but having that direct experience is everything. And I want to say too, like that there's this weird trend of psychedelic machismo in terms of not just dosing, like, "Oh, you did this much, well, I did this much,"
Heroes dose.
but also this idea that you should be able to handle your shit in there, and if you can't handle your shit in there,
Yeah.
you didn't do enough work. You're not, like, in touch enough. It's like, no, I'm not trying to ever paint myself as the most seasoned psychonaut or the biggest heroic doser because I'm absolutely not. But I've done enough to know that no amount of breath work, no amount of like intention setting is
Mhm.
going to protect you if you hit like the fucking torrent of psychic demonic energy. Like it's just going to be hard and you just got to ride it out and you got to just do literally whatever you have to do to make it. Like that's what my experience in Peru was like on my ayahuasca retreat a few years ago. It was just hold on. It was just absolutely like psychic fractal shipwreck insanity and just hold on and hold on and hold on, and it eventually did result in some great shit, but it took a lot to get there. And it was and it
Yeah, there's a period of integration of all that, right? Like, it's like months sometimes that you're,
yeah.
like, struggling. That's why a lot of people have, like, their darkest times after, like, an ayahuasca journey or something like that.
Yeah, and
I've never done one myself.
and people have such a wide range of experiences. And again, it hugely matters like what else is going in the brew. Is it just the
Mm,
classic two ingredients of the chacruna leaf and the ayahuasca vine? Are they adding toei? Are they adding barks? Are they adding other trees that the shamans work with? And
interesting.
specifically in the case of where I went, there was tons of additives. Like they gave us a big list of all this stuff. So I don't know. That's all I've ever done. But what I can say is that that sort of Jungian adage about, you can't touch heaven, no tree can touch heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Like the ayahuasca experience and the heroic dose experience in general for me has
Mhm.
always been that. It's always been that. And you want to downplay the yeah, I'll touch hell, whatever. Like you want to downplay that, but when you're in it, it is very serious and it's very dark and it's
Very.
very scary, very disorienting, and that should not be glossed over. And there's that, but back to the initial point of this machismo of like, oh, you can't, you took that much and it was hard for you. Well, I took this much and I barely felt anything. It's like, well, if that's the case, one, your brain is broken, and
Yeah.
two, then
Or maybe he's like a yogi.
I don't
He's
think
so
so.
enlightened. Remember that one yogi that, like, Ram Dass gave,
Oh
a
yeah, yeah,
huge
yeah,
hit of acid to,
yeah,
and he was like, "I feel nothing," because
yeah,
he was
yeah.
just,
His
you just met the most enlightened being ever, Michael. There you
Yeah,
go.
Neem Karoli Baba. They're all over my YouTube comments. They're all like, I don't feel anything unless I take 7 grams of psilocybin.
Oh my god.
Um,
I've never gone that hard.
it's
I've gone, I don't really measure when I take a little spoonful of it. I'm just like, "Okay, let's go. Let's see what's up."
Well, if you don't feel called to do it, don't feel like you need to do it. But if you do feel
Yeah.
called to do it,
Would you
I think
recommend
it's
doing it, like, by yourself, like, in a quiet room? Like, when did you do yours?
it's run the gamut for me. What I tend to like doing, or what I've done in the past mostly, is like small group of friends, like in my living room or in like a close friend's place where we're all just comfortable and
Mhm.
it's you kind of know what you're getting into and comfortable, whatever.
Hmm.
However, now that we're on this topic and we're talking about all these things of feeling like I need something that doesn't quite exist,
Yeah.
going deeper into the Western esoteric rabbit hole and confronting how deep and throughout a lot of our history pervasive the language of ritual was, and that ritual was
Yep.
the highest art, really the highest art of
Yeah.
curating a space, a practice,
Like,
something that
initiatory
yeah,
rites. Those were very important. That was, like,
yes.
everything, you know?
I think that is what my soul is crying out for now, is figuring
Yeah.
out how to either find or create a container with real ritualistic protein and then
Mhm.
adding something like a psychedelic on top of it. But
Yeah.
that's like the sort of top of the mountain of a lot of groundwork that you're doing ahead of time. Like that's what I think I'm leaning toward now. And I even think I used to think the idea of a big ritual without something like that at the core of it was sort of silly. Like I used to think like, "Oh, so Freemasons are going and they're saying all these fancy words and they're getting initiated and nobody's taking a single mushroom in this? Like what the fuck?"
Yeah.
And now I'm like, "Man, I think I might want to do that. I think I might
Yeah.
want to be um at the core of some I don't know. I don't know if it needs to be a process
It's like
or
embodiment, it sounds like what you're talking about, but it's
yeah.
interesting because a lot of my rabbit holes right now for Back from the Borderline, where I do more, like, psychology-based stuff and just, like,
Mhm.
trauma recovery, is a lot of somatic experiencing, which is made by Peter Levine. It's that, therapeutic modality, it's rather new. Basically, the mind-body connection, what we've, the East and other esoteric traditions have known for a long time. But he talks about the importance of embodiment and, like, especially in recovery of, like, sexual assault and stuff like that. Some of his recommendations are like touching your hand and being like, this is my hand, or you
Mhm.
know what I mean, like touching like certain parts, getting more embodied. And when I've done all my esoteric studies, there's a thread of embodiment there too. Like, in the Catholic Church, the Eucharist is like an embodied practice, right? And doing something, having a ritual of something, drawing a tarot card or anything like that. These are like ways to get physical as well
Yeah.
as mental. And it just, there's a power in that, I think.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something definitely special about there being a physical component, about there being serious mental, psychological orientation toward the divine or the spirit world or whatever. And we want to skip over these things like they're not part of the technology. Like we think the technology is the molecule, like
Yeah.
to continue this line of logic. But the technology is everything that surrounds the molecule. Like the molecule is just a molecule unless you wrap it in sacred language. And we're so divorced from any kind of sacred language, at least most of us. Like we don't have most millennials, most people younger or even older, honestly, like religion, if we do have it, is often just a sort of like
It's
going through the
exoteric,
motions. Yeah, like
right? Yeah. Going to
at,
church on Christmas.
yeah. At the end of Hero with a Thousand Faces, Campbell says something like to the effect of we participate in monkey religions. It's like
Yeah.
the acting out of a I've been trained to do this thing,
Yeah,
but there's
going through the
no
motions. It's why
yeah.
someone can go to like mass and, do communion and they feel not. I used to do it. When I was little,
Mhm.
I'd go to church and I did communion and I would go up there and be like, "Yum." Like, "Ooh, another cracker," because I was
Mhm.
just so, I didn't know. I was young. I was like 10. I did. And so you could see the old woman in the church that comes there every single day and she goes up
Mm.
there and she truly believes in the power of the Eucharist and like is undergoing this as a sacred ritual, like, to her, because of her belief in that and because of her respect for that ritual, like, she's gonna have a much different transformative
Yeah.
quality of that experience than little me who didn't know, you know what I mean? So it's just, and we do that all the time, you know,
Yeah.
we buy crystals, and think a girl, "Oh, I'm gonna get this because this means I'll attract love," like, right? Or you really meditate on that crystal and maybe you do active imagination with it and you really, you know, that's a different ballgame, right? So it's just, that's what I think is the differentiator there, the embodiment piece.
Or you pick up a grimoire, you trap a demon in that crystal, and um,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe we'll go there later in the conversation. But let's play another
To
fun
be
and
clear, I've never successfully trapped a demon in a crystal, but,
no
you know?
comment, no comment. But um, let's play a different
Cool.
fun, potentially heretical game.
Sick.
I wonder how many terrible things in history have started out with that
Oh,
phrase. Let's play
probably
a
a
fun,
lot.
potentially heretical game.
Yeah.
Um,
We're blessed that we can play heretical games.
yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. What is the difference between the young Molly? I said young instead of
Young
young. I've done that
young
several
Molly.
times. I've done
Sick.
that several times, and it's because I get battered in the comments for saying young instead of jung.
Young.
Um,
It's whatever.
yeah, it's I know Jungian scholars that say
Yes,
young and Jungian.
me
So
too. I've heard
anyway,
it many.
um,
We're not German or
yeah,
Swiss,
right.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, do you pronounce all do you pronounce your Japanese car name correctly? Do you pronounce
do not.
your
I
canon?
just learned the other day that Porsche was Porsche,
Oh
and I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
someone said Porsche, and I was like, "Stupid person doesn't know that it's
yeah,
Porsche," and then Sass was like, "No, Molly, it's actually Porsche," and I went, "Oh,
yeah. I
my
lived in
bad."
Japan for a while, and on that same note, if you see a commercial for like Canon cameras,
Yeah,
it's Canon, Canon,
sick.
and I'm like, whoa,
I actually kinda
we
like
just
that better.
oh
Everything
yeah, it's way
sounds,
better.
like, way cooler in a Japanese accent. It sounds more like way more hardcore.
And what's also cool is Kanon is actually a bodhisattva slash goddess who is I think she's an emanation of like uh what's his name? It might be like Avalokiteshvara or something, but
I wonder if that's
it's
where they got the name for the company from.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm
Mm,
hoping. It's a have you heard of Guanyin?
yeah.
It's Kanon is the Japanese version of Guanyin. So it's
Oh,
kind of cool.
interesting. Like the divine, like, nurturing mother
Yeah,
figure,
yeah,
right?
who weeps for the suffering
Yeah,
of
like, basically, like,
mankind.
what do they say? Like, it's like the Virgin Mary, but they call her Our Lady of Perpetual Sorrows, that one.
Damn, that is emo. That is like the heaviest emo phrase I can think of.
That's what
Um,
they call her.
so
She's
that
emo as
wasn't
fuck.
the heretical game I was thinking, but
Oh,
um, what I was gonna try to get to is what is the difference between the Molly who goes up there, eats the cracker and feels nothing, and the old woman who goes up there and feels everything? What do you think that is? Do you think it's perspective? Do you think it's
it's
psychology?
the
Do you think
crone,
it's
right? It's like maiden mother crone. I think it's people, there's something about, cycles of life experience
yeah,
that you don't really, because I was that person in my 20s. I've always been smart, you know, like, I've had, like, I'm witty, but I was dumb as hell, and I was cocky as hell, and I literally thought I had it all figured out and that anyone older than me was just, like, in the past, stuck in the past, right? And so I
yeah,
think the difference between the young kid and that woman is, like, someone who has seen people around her die, who has, like, probably done work, inner work. She doesn't maybe think her religion has all the answers, you know, but she knows that, like, this ritual and finding time to go within is, like, somehow the most important thing that you can do in, like,
mhm.
the mess of the world, right? And, I think that's the major difference for me is I always was like, God, I don't want to be that person who's in their 30s and then looking at people in their 20s and going, oh, so young, like, because that's so fucking annoying. So, like, I understand because I was just there, but I also now go, whoa, I have a whole different perspective for the people that were older and wiser and kind of like told me to maybe like try to stop and see if there's something there with this whole spirituality thing, because I was so angry about religion for so long because of how exclusionary I thought it was and making me feel like I was going to hell. I just didn't think there was anything there for me. But
Yeah,
now I do understand. I hope that answers your question.
it
It's like a
does.
long way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I think the core there is perspective.
Yeah.
And actually I posted this meme. I don't know where the what the original source was, but there's a meme that speaks to this directly that I just posted, and it's like uh 10-year picture, I don't know, 10 years with no filter, 10-year difference with no filter.
Hmm.
And it's two pictures, and one is the fool and the other one is the hermit from the tarot deck. It's like, it's just that there's that
Yeah, it's true.
perspective that comes with lived experience, but but we have to be missing something too, because I do think while aging alone clearly gives you wisdom, there's an obvious reason that that archetype is true, that
For
aging,
sure.
that you should respect your elders. However, um, I think it was my friend Godzi that said this. There's a difference between olders and elders.
For sure.
Like some
For
people
sure.
just get older. They just keep
And they're
going through the
just rigid.
motions. They keep being slaves to their complexes. They keep
Yep.
just going on the samsaric wheel. And I don't even mean through literal reincarnation, though
Most
probably that
people.
too. Probably that too. Yeah. Um, so what is the difference? That's another question that
Mhm.
might be harder to answer. What do you think the difference is between an older and an elder?
Like, someone who observes the cycles of life, I really know, and sees their part in it, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's not fighting with life, that actually understands that they have to kind of, like, move with it, and it's very intuitive, I think, because there are so many people who have not done any of the esoteric studies that we've done that are probably 25 times more integrally spiritual than I could ever be,
Yeah.
because they just, I mean, I'm just taking, for example, someone like, take an Amish person maybe, right? Like, who's
Right.
just grown up and they work with the earth, they take only what they need. And I'm not saying there aren't any people that grow up in Amish cultures that are traumatized and stuff, but I do think there's an element there of like someone who could even be an elder who is a 25-year-old Amish guy,
Yeah.
because he knows things that I would never know. And um so I think that it's the inner mystic of someone who kind of like sees through the layers, like sees through the veil a little bit. And I think that there are people you can just tell when they're that kind of person, you know?
Yeah. I'm sorry if I was smirking because I was imagining like an Amish survivor coming after you in the comments, like,
I
"I'm an Amish
know.
survivor. You don't know what
Oh,
goes down there."
and I absolutely fully
Yeah.
believe that that's the case, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
Like, I'm sure there's that, but I also think there's, like, so many people that could say, I mean, there are people who have gotten deeply into Buddhism that have been traumatized for life
Yeah.
because there are Zen masters who completely become
It's so
sexual
fucked up.
predators. Every single spiritual tradition has been, the well has been poisoned, and there are people
Yeah.
who have amazing psychic abilities that take advantage of people and haven't done their inner work. I think that's the scariest part, and why I love the word of sovereignty, of really like, you are responsible for your own inner work. And the more you do that, the easier it is for you to spot shit that might not be so, like, don't outsource your growth onto other people that claim just to be more confident, because they may be blind.
Amen to that. Amen to
Yeah.
that. And yeah, you speak to something that's so discouraging, is that there are these places where people finally take the leap and they're
Yeah.
like, fuck it, I'm going to go become a llama, or I'm going to go,
Such a shame.
do whatever. And then you find out that there's some, you
I
know,
know.
supposedly reincarnated tulku who's
Ugh,
like abusing all of his,
I
all of his
know.
devotees or whatever. That, yeah, that's so discouraging. And it makes you think that that it's all just a bunch of pedophiles. It's all just a bunch of like pervs
But
that are using power dynamics to,
and
yeah,
that poisons people against, like, spirituality, which is such a
I
shame,
know.
because there are, like I remember, like, yesterday, there was, like when I was at one of the lowest points that I ever was, I went into a random Catholic church, like, just, like,
Mhm.
randomly. I had not been to church, and I had a conversation with one of the priests there who I, like, ran into. Um, I assume he was because he was working there, like, he was there, like, adjusting things, and, maybe he's just some random guy off
Yeah,
the
yeah,
street, or
he's
maybe
just
he was a figment of my imagination now. But all I know is that I had a conversation with this guy, and I just told him he asked, like, why I was there. We got into a conversation, and he really helped me, like, in that moment, and he was just gave me some spiritual advice, just said some words, and it and I realized that it's just, like, there are good people in all of these different traditions, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just so important we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because it's like there are so many Catholic priests out there who are amazing people who maybe are like doing centering prayer stuff. There's like really cool shit going on in contemplative Christianity right now. And so I just really think that but I'm like a huge Ken Wilber fan. I love
yeah.
integral theory,
Mhm.
and I there are a lot of like priests of different major uh religions that are like imams, right, from Islam, like
Mhm. Yeah.
studying integral theory, and there are good people, and I just think that the conspiracy theory rabbit hole of everything is a demonic cabal is like it's it's
Yeah.
also not
It's
balanced.
no, not at all. Not at all.
So it's just, and it doesn't help you believing the world is like that. If you actually are a spiritual practitioner, then like how would that help your reality if you're constantly seeing pedophile
Right.
cabal devil shit all around you?
Yeah,
It's just
totally.
wild.
Totally. Not only does it not help you, it actually defangs you from being able to do anything of consequence. It completely robs you of your agency because if you live
Yes.
in a world that's controlled by fill in the blank matrix master, you have no
Yes.
power, you have no ability. And that's one of the things I don't like about this like matrix gnostic language that has really taken over a
I
lot of
know.
the esoteric it's like this weird milieu that's developed where even like the word demiurge now, that's a word that's like the perfect example of this because demiurge to everyone means false evil god, but that's not originally what it meant. Like the demiurge was just the craftsman consciousness essentially that, helped create the universe and
But
then
that's where we go wrong when it's like a game of telephone. Now you can
right.
really see how the Bible is like just a tiny fragment of whatever parables were told and told and told, because we're
Mhm.
doing the same thing now. We're playing spiritual telephone with all of these like phrases. And half the time, that's why I think that's another reason why I wanted to like go actually buy grimoires myself and like
Yeah, yeah.
actually read some of these things, because I just went, you know what? How about I'm just going to figure out like I'm gonna read all this stuff, and then the connecting threads that feel right to me, I'm gonna go with that, you know?
It's
It's
so
the
weird,
only
Molly,
way.
because it's this is so fucking weird because I'm like right at the same point as you, where I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going deep into these esoteric waters. Like I told you before, I've gone through kind of the whole history of Western esotericism. But
Mhm.
one of the things you find when you do that and you're looking at it from a scholarly angle is it's scholarly. There's no
Yes.
practice. There's no, the host of that show I was telling you about is great, but
Yeah.
he's not coming from a lineage where he's saying like this is a practice that's worked for me, these are the teachers that are good, this is the whatever.
You know what? When you get into esotericism though, they say like don't talk about it, right? Like so
Right.
I feel like sometimes guys like that, they know they can get taken more seriously when they just talk about the studies, and then they leave it to you to
Yeah.
find the pieces, which makes me like, cuz lately that's what I'm doing with Night Night Bitch. I'm not talking about my own experiences, because I know if I do, someone said something once like talking about your spiritual experiences is like trying to explain the flavor orange to someone. Like you're just going to
Yeah.
sound stupid. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's just what it
No.
made me think of. I'm like, it's so ineffable that I can understand why guys like that take that route.
Yeah. But at the same time, you do want to hear from people that you think are like have their head on reasonably
I
straight
know.
and
And what
have
do you
a
actually do? What are your
right.
practices?
Yeah,
I
and
know.
does it work and what
I
happens when you do
know.
this and what does it mean?
I know.
So I'm
I
gonna
struggle with the same feelings. I tell
and
you what I, like, try to tell myself when I struggle it, but I'm exactly in the same boat.
I'm gonna ask you to break that tradition to whatever extent you're comfortable
What, and
doing
talk
so.
about what I do?
Yeah, if you're willing to. I mean, you
Yeah.
definitely don't have to.
No, I'm happy sharing it because I feel like what better place for me to share it than on this podcast?
And
Because
we're an
'cause I'm with,
hour and
like,
15 in, so we've shucked off all the.
anybody who's not with us
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
As I said, I told you a little bit about like the active imagination stuff. I've been trying to do that more consistently. Like I'm doing a lot of dream work. So I'm trying to remember my dreams more. And so that's me like setting intentions before I go to bed to like remember my dreams. Throughout the day, I'm doing like those checks, like Gurdjieff kind of talked about, where you're kind of going like, I'm awake right now. I'm awake, or like touching your hand and like, you know what I mean? Like doing certain things. Cause I
Mhm,
really want to like be able to lucid dream. That's like a thing that I would love to
mhm,
be able to access. Never have I done this before. Um, so that's been really fruitful working with my dreams, waking up in the morning. And then if there's a character in my dream, I do active imagination with that particular archetype. So like I'm watching the show Vikings right now,
mhm.
and it's such a good show. And I'm way late to the party on that one. But anyway, I
I
had a
haven't watched it
dream.
either.
It's so fucking good. But I had a dream about one of the characters in it, and he was in it, and he's like a very like fierce Viking warrior guy, and he was in my dream. And so it was wild because I was having this conversation with him. My mom was in the dream, and so I woke up and I trust that, like, if I remember the dream that prominently, I'm like, "Hmm, that must be something important." And so um, I did active imagination with him. Like, I just thought, like, "What message do you have for me?" And I just kind of free write on that. So I do that. And one of the most interesting things recently that's happened to me with active imagination that's been, like, the most, like, mind-blowing synchronicity moment, I guess, is, I woke up in the morning from a dream, and I went down and started doing active imagination on my couch, and all of a sudden, like, the name John Wainwright popped up in my mind,
Ooh,
and I was like, "What?" It's such a specific name. Like,
right.
"The fuck?" I was like, "John Wainwright? Like, why?" And then I just kept writing, and then I went, "Molly, fucking look up this name. What are you
Yeah.
doing? Like, don't be like, ignore it. Why did this a random name?" So I Google it, and I shit you not, this guy is like one of the first army generals that went into battle with Abraham Lincoln, like during the Civil War. And
Hmm.
he lived in Texas, and Texas was like very important to him, apparently, like all this crazy stuff. But I read about him, and this man was like a thing.
Yeah.
And I just went, and weirdly, the picture of him, um, matched my mental picture. Like, he was wearing a
Wow.
uniform, and the picture that I saw when I Googled it, it looked just like him. And so I was like, "What the fuck?" I still don't know what that means,
Hmm.
but all I know is that that happened.
Yeah, that's
And
super interesting, yeah.
that literally just happened a couple of weeks ago, and his name keeps popping into my brain randomly, so I don't know what the deal is with that character, but that's a thing that started happening. Behind me, I really love doing, like, the Black Madonna is something that I am particularly fascinated with. I love the Cathars and the Albigensians and, like, the Essenes. Like, this is, like, the
Mhm.
sects of,
Yeah, they're like
esoteric.
Gnostic. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but the Cathars are particularly, again, it's a particular synchronicity for me. I'm constantly drawn to things about the Cathars, and so I know that there's something there for me there, and there's a lot of Mary Magdalene stuff, so I just started working a lot with, um, the mother archetype. So I found, like, an old, antique, Black Madonna that's back there, and I just started building out my own altar with just like pieces of trees that I walk by that I feel like I want to add to it. And I just have added to this little altar. So I do that. I really am into herbal stuff. Like I'm like a little stick witch. uh, but yeah, so that's what I do. And I just like, I really know that my own personal power is in just like trusting things that pop into my mind. I'm not somebody who has these mystical visions. I
Yeah.
I hear things like, but it's not a voice. It's just like I should look this up. I should read that book, or I hear it talk. I follow the threads. I hear someone mention something in a podcast episode, so I follow that. That's how I happened to go and see like the UAP experiences with the Bledsoes, right? Like
Oh God, we didn't even talk about that.
I
Yeah.
know, right? That's a whole other episode. But I heard Ryan on the Duncan Trussell Family Hour
Yeah.
podcast. Duncan Trussell, fucking G
Yeah.
mystic
He was
as fuck.
definitely one of my early huge influences doing this for sure.
A mystic, a modern mystic,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. Heard Ryan Bledsoe on his podcast, and hit Chris Bledsoe's story, which is Ryan's dad, is that he saw the Divine Mother. Like, he's one of the only people that's like really kind of reporting on seeing UAPs, or the phenomenon, as he calls it. And he believes it's a spiritual thing,
Hmm.
and it manifested to him one time as a being that called itself the Lady. And for me, again, this is a whole rabbit hole that we could go down. I don't know, we don't have much time, but one of my earlier mystical experiences was having like the only proper, like, full mystical experience I had, which I talked about on Ryan's podcast. It's the only time I've ever told it. It comes out in the next couple of weeks too. I had a overwhelming mystical experience where I was made aware of the words like, "You are mother, I am mother, we are mother."
Hmm.
And this was back when I was coming off 6 different psych meds. I had not done any inner work whatsoever, and I wrote it down in my diary, and I felt so crazy that I ripped it out and, like, threw it away. I wish I still had that piece of paper in my diary, but I felt compelled to write that down, and then I went down the, like, Abraham Hicks rabbit hole, like, watched some Teal Swan videos, and then I was like, "What the fuck am I doing? Get me out of this spiritual place." Ripped it up, but then when obviously, it came back into my mind as I was hearing Chris's story, and then I started diving into Marian apparition, experiences, and how, like, this feminine archetype has appeared to
Yeah.
people, and it drew me in. So I knew there was something there, and I'm following. So for me, the thread is following this like divine mother thing, wherever it takes me. And it took me to Chris, and then being on their property in North Carolina, like seeing uh phenomena.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, these people are associated with the infamous Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Well, Chris Bledsoe, and you, for those of you who want to like do a dive into that, look up Chris Bledsoe, and also you could totally look up Ryan Bledsoe, interview with Duncan Trussell. It'll just a Google search will return it for you, because they could tell their story better than I ever could, and they're coming on my podcast, Chris and Ryan, um, which. So if your listeners tune in the next few weeks on my podcast, they can hear them speak about it themselves. But long story short, um, the History Channel has a series called Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and Chris Bledsoe appeared on this most recent season. And it's these two people, and I'm just paraphrasing here. It's two guys that are investigating some of this stuff. They're interviewing people who have had experiences with unidentified phenomena. Um, I don't know, extraterrestrial intelligence,
Yeah.
however we want to be calling this. I really
Yeah, yeah.
don't the names. And Chris is one of those people. And every three-letter agency is wanting to know what's going on with him. And I witnessed it for myself. I went out on his property, and they invited me. I DM'd his son Ryan, and I just basically told him about my mystical experience, the mother thing, and I said I was doing a episode on toxic shame, and I wanted to interview them because they had been publicly shamed in their community, because uh they were the kind of Christian sect that like speaks like in tongues. What is that? It's like
Oh, Pentecostal or
Pentecostal,
yeah.
hardcore Pentecostal. And so when Chris started coming out and speaking about his experience, his entire church community said that he was demonic. Like, they didn't want anything to do with him. He got shunned and was told he was crazy. Um, I think it was, I can't remember what, Discovery Channel did some kind of documentary that completely made them look like they were lying years and years and years ago. And so then he went in hiding, kind of like, I'm not going to tell my story if people are just going to call me a liar, right? They really set him up to fail in this episode, and it was horrible experience for his family. So this last year, getting this documentary spot with the History Channel was so validating and vindicating for the Bledsoes, because they actually went out there, put like one of those like brain sensors on his head, and like had like a neuroscientist come out. And when he was interacting with the phenomena, which appeared while they were filming this episode, they could see that his brain state went into like some kind of meditative brain state.
So like yeah.
They watched the change when he watched the phenomena appear above him, so they can like distinctively say there's a connection. And
Wow.
Jim Simmerman wrote the foreword of his book that came out called UFO of God. Like, some people that are high up in the defense department of the United States are like co-signing. It's like one of the guys who, you know, the movie with what's the actor? Damn, I could think of it. Men Who Stare at Goats. You know
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
movie?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, why? He's Brad Pitt and George Clooney. There
Clooney?
we go.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, come on, George Clooney. The guy who George Clooney played in Men Who Stare at Goats is one of the guys who is like very, very close with Chris
Yeah,
Bledsoe.
that squad is so interesting because then that
Yeah.
starts to get into, like, the Robert Monroe stuff and the, like, in
Yep.
the, the,
I have a
Gateway
clip from like
Protocol
the
and all of
Gateway
that shit.
Protocol and Night Night Bitch.
Oh, yeah. See, this is
Yeah.
territory we haven't even gotten into,
Yeah,
but
I know.
so one of my patrons I was
Uh-huh.
just talking about this, I randomly watched, have you seen Doctor Sleep? The
No, but I've heard of
So
it.
it's directed by Mike Flanagan, who does all the good horror shit on Netflix, like Haunting
Mhm.
of Hill House and all those.
Uh-huh.
Um, and there's a pretty strong element of like astral projection and like out of body type stuff in that movie.
Mhm.
And it got me thinking about Gateway Protocol and Robert Monroe because years and years ago I talked to Tom Campbell, who's like one of these people who um, he's a physicist. He was a defense contractor, somehow heard about Robert Monroe, went to, whatever the Monroe Institute and did all this stuff
Uh-huh.
himself. So I've always been like sort of interested, but also like, I don't know. I don't know if this shit's
I
real. I have
read
no
all of
idea.
his books. I gobbled them up so
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
I got
weird. Like
freaked out
this.
when I was doing the Gateway tapes,
Oh,
I'm
you've
not gonna
done it.
lie. Oh, I've dipped my toe in, yeah, and I got really freaked
I
out.
gotta know. I gotta know. I gotta know what happened.
It's mostly because I've here's my problem, is that there have been so many times where I feel myself about to go into, like, a really deep kind of state of some
Hmm.
kind, and I scare the shit out of myself out of it,
Yeah.
right? It happened to me when I was at the Bledsoe property. Like, Chris even said to me, like, I have a lot of PTSD from just random things in my life anyways, and so I it's kind of funny because I jump scare easy, but there's actually a darkness to why I jump scare easy. And so, I still have like intense scare reactions. And so that prevents me, I think, sometimes from getting really, really deep into my spiritual work. And
Hmm.
that's my biggest block now, is actually overcoming my fear, because I actually sense that I could really go there, and I
Yeah.
stop myself and scare myself out of going there. So that's kind of what happened when I did the Gateway tapes. It took me a while, because what I love though is they really do help you set up kind of a good intro ritual. Have you ever listened to any of them?
No, no, and let's just to give people a little
Oh yeah,
context.
sorry,
So
I'm going all
there's
in.
all these. No, me too. But
Yeah.
there are, you've probably even run into some of this stuff on YouTube because I've seen videos that have tons of plays that are like
Oh yeah.
declassified
Oh my
CIA,
god. One of those.
proof the psychic realm exists and that
Yeah.
astral projection's real, and
Yeah.
that, like, it is true that the
Mhm.
CIA, different agencies did look into these technologies.
And are
They're
using them. They use remote viewing. It
right.
is a thing.
They had a remote viewing project. Maybe they still do it, but during the Cold War, it's documented like this stuff. That's what this Men Who Stare at Goats movie and book is about.
Mhm.
And there are names associated with people who are known remote viewers, like Ingo Swann and
Mhm.
uh, Targ, and I can't. That's all I can think of. Right,
Targ.
Russell Targ, I
That
think it is, isn't
I was
it?
like, Targ sounds I was like, is this like a Norse god or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah, Targ. You use
Hardcore.
Targ to warg into the eyes of
Literally.
crows or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there is a paper trail, and what's really intriguing to me is when you Google this stuff like Robert Monroe, Gateway Protocol, you would think that the very first thing that would come up is a debunking. This is fake. But one of the first, but the what the preponderance of evidence seems to be, and people who have done it,
Mhm.
the overwhelming thing seems to be there's something to this. Like
100%.
there's something to this.
There
And
is.
and what it is it's like these, and you can speak to it better than me, but I know
Mhm.
generally it's like it's these meditative sorts of protocols. And don't they use like binaural beats to like
They're called like
synchronize? Yeah.
he calls them, well, yeah, they're like isotonic tones, or like, what are they? He calls
Isotonic.
them,
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
uh, I can find it in like 2 seconds.
Okay.
It's basically, if they're called like, yeah, they're called, it's he calls it resonant tuning. That's what
Mm.
he calls it. And, y you'll eh the gateway process basically walks you through like a protocol, and the gateway tapes, he has different tapes. So it's like you start at tape 1, and it's like a it's very intense. Like, I
Mm.
didn't make it through the whole process, but he starts you in, the beautiful part about it is they start you off on baby steps. Like the first step, he just teaches you how to create like your, he calls it like your resonance chamber or something. And
Mm.
essentially, he walks you through like how to relax yourself. Then you do your resonant tuning, and you basically put like a barrier around yourself, right? He walks you through like this visualization practice of sealing off your energy. And then you go into, he calls it these different states. Like there's like focus 10, focus
Yeah,
12,
yeah,
like
yeah.
different levels. And before people start getting freaked out, because as soon as I started this, I was like, this sounds like, is this like some Scientology stuff going on? Like, what's
Or am I
happening?
being
Like,
brainwashed?
oh,
I'd be worried that I'm like
yeah,
secretly being brainwashed.
after reading about it and like reading about the Monroe Institute and also reading all of his books, Robert Monroe sounds to me so much like Jung. Like they
Mm.
both went, if you read his books, they're so, it reads like a good sci-fi. Like he goes, it talks, it's like the Red Book. That's what it reminded me of. And so I was hooked. And he basically, and I also was fascinated because I've done enough reading now on like a past life regression and certain things like that, that all the different books that I had read, um, there's so many overlapping things of what he said. And it's like, it even had like a lot of like Bardo state-esque type situations going in there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I like this. And I actually don't think it sounds too dissimilar to the esoteric threads that I've been finding. So, and I just go with my gut now at this point. I think I have a pretty good inkling of like, the Monroe Institute didn't seem to me to be trying to take my money. I found like a free download of all the tapes like on some like Telegram group.
Yeah.
And so like love that. Love like people on Reddit sharing random shit on Telegram. And so I found it and I just started doing it. I loved it, but again, I started going into such a deep meditative state that I started seeing things, like colors started
Mm.
changing, and I went, "Whoa, what the fuck?" And then I got really freaked out because I shouldn't have probably read his books because he had encounters with a lot of really dark energies, and I think part of me is really scared to
Yeah.
go there.
That's what that's the thing with any of this stuff where you're going into these non-ordinary states of consciousness is
Mhm.
from the outside looking in, from the beige, mundane, daily sort of
Yeah,
POV, we fantasize about this stuff like, "Oh, I want to take a heroic dose. I want to go
yeah,
to the
but do
to do
you though?
ayahuasca. I want to do," but you're going to get there.
Exactly.
And y that's the great thing about
You can't
molecules is
put it back in the
once you've
box.
taken them, you're on the ride. But with this
Yeah,
kinda stuff, that's actually what I found is that there wa there wasn't debate about whether or not it was legit. There was debate about whether or what was really happening. Like,
yeah,
is it just your brain doing this? Or is it real astral projection, or is it this or whatever
yeah.
it is? So that was one part of it. But then a lot of people actually echoed what you're saying, where they got scared and they felt like,
Yep,
oh, like the first couple times they started to feel some kind of like peeling away
literally,
type
that's how it
feeling. They're just
was.
like, no, 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 that's
Yeah.
scary.
It's like being at the top of a roller coaster, you know what I
Mm,
mean? And you're just going like, half the if you weren't on the roller coaster, if you got to the top, if you had a choice and you'd be like, "Never mind, I don't wanna go down this huge fucking thing,"
yeah,
probably you wouldn't, because there
yeah.
it's that feeling of like you're going, "Ooh," but you don't have a choice, so you just do it. That's how I feel when get to these mystical states of consciousness. I know that I'm capable of them. I've been to like the very tip, and I've just been like, "Oh, fuck." I've never allowed myself to go that deep. I do, but when I do, um, For me, Zaz calls it, my husband calls my when I take mushrooms, my sea witch time, because I basically just look like a little goblin creature, and I go in my
Yeah.
room
Wrapped
and
up in
I
a
just
blanket. That's the way to
literally
go. That's the
and
way
I
to go.
cry a lot. Like, I
Me
just
too.
mostly cry a lot. I just cry a ton. I don't wanna see anybody, and I just read my books, and then I'll maybe nap for a while and cry some more, and then I come out feeling better.
Yeah.
And my husband really represses stuff a lot. Like, he's got it all together. Um, and he was just so agitated a while back and really stressed about things. And I'm very externalizing with my emotions, but
Yeah.
he's very stoic.
Hmm.
And I said, do you want to, do you want to do some mushrooms? Cause I feel like, and all my people that say out there, like, take some plant medicine. I have reverence for it, but I still just can't do like, take
The
the plant
vernacular.
medicine.
Yeah.
Like, I just
Yeah.
say, "Hey, do you want me to make you some psilocybin tea? Because I feel like you need to fucking cry it out." And, I didn't say that. I just said, "Do you want to?" And I'd made it for him, and then I don't know what I was doing. I forgot that I gave him that. He came out of the room, like, 5 hours later, and I was like, "Oh, how did that go?" He's like, "I was basically sitting in the closet crying for 2 hours." And I was like, "How was that?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "It was fucking great." And the rest of the day, he was feeling so much better because he just needed to fucking let it out.
Yes.
Like, guys are not okay out here. Like, they need to cry it out. Like, go take some mushroom tea and sit in your closet and fucking cry for a
Yeah.
while.
And also, I mean, for me, usually, what I alluded to with ayahuasca, where it's like a hell and heaven type
Yes.
trip. That's typically how it goes. I spend a lot of time just like laughing hysterically, a lot of time ugly crying. Um,
Gotta
with
love an ugly
with
cry. I
with
love
really
crying.
the crazy thing that's happened to me on very high doses is what I call the sort of like dilation effect and like veil melting effect where you don't know whether you're laughing or crying anymore. And it's
Yes.
just this raw
Yep.
expression of like, like just,
Yeah. It's
um,
catharsis.
it is, but it's also a lot. It's also a
Yeah.
very raw
Yep.
sight. I don't even know. I
And
don't
you
even want to
feel
get too.
exhausted afterwards.
You do. You feel. Luckily, I've never had a problem re-assimilating after these
No.
experiences, and I, like you, feel good. Like, I feel like I went
Mhm.
through something important,
Me
like,
too.
it really went somewhere. But before we get off the topic of the Gateway Protocol and
Mhm.
all this other stuff, to people who are thinking like, "This just sounds like new age, what the fuck?" Like,
I get it, man.
one of the
I so get
things.
it.
Oh, yeah, me too, me
Yeah.
too. But one of the things an idea that I ran into, that goes I don't think we know how far it goes back. But in the Platonic tradition, there's this what they call the Okima Pneuma. And the Okima is the soul vehicle. Um and the Pneuma, is like this I guess like quintessential sacred
It's like the
energy.
quintessence, right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, pretty much.
Yeah.
But the okima is like this. It's not a physical thing clearly that we have in our bodies, but it's some kind of container that keeps the soul inside of it and also allows the soul to travel. So this idea of soul travel and of soul flight is, this exists in
It's not new.
shamanistic cultures, this exists in western esoteric Greek
Mhm.
contexts. So this is definitely something that has existed since time immemorial. And I think we've probably largely lost touch with it because, again, we don't take any of these things seriously.
Do you
But
play Assassin's Creed?
I've played
Right? It's
a
kind
bunch
of
of
like the
them.
Animus, right? Or
Oh,
like
right,
the and
right,
like
right. Yeah.
where they like you are I just like I was playing the most recent one, like
Nice.
Valhalla,
The
so
Viking one, I
sick.
have it, but I've like
So
barely
good.
played it. Yeah.
It's so good, but like, that it's plays on that whole different dimensions thing and like
Hmm.
skipping timelines and all these things. And I know that that can again, that can get like really intense for some people to even start thinking about,
Yeah.
but
Some people need to root right here. Some people need
they
to root
do.
right down.
And
This
that's
podcast
fine.
probably isn't for those people.
Yeah, no, it's
But
it's totally fine. But yeah, the Monroe Institute, the Monroe stuff really kind of reminds me of that, right? Where it's just like really realizing that, like you said, there is an inner essence like in the acorn, right? That can go different places if you know
mhm.
how to do so. And some people, it just happens when we're sleeping anyways. supposedly.
Yeah. Do you think you'll return to that, or do you think there's something that feels not quite right about it for you?
In terms of, like, the gateway process,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, there's a reason I stopped, I think, and maybe that was a sign from my psyche that I wasn't quite, like, ready for that yet, and so it would be interesting to kind of go back because that man, I really went, like, full both feet
Mhm.
in because it was so early that I came across the gateway stuff before I had done like, that was, like, a year and a half ago, and arguably at only about 2 and some years into, like, throwing everything I have into this, in terms of studying it, I'm still like a baby when it comes to
Oh, yeah.
understanding these things, like, so I don't know. I don't know if I will go back. I don't feel, like, particularly drawn to because I think I'm still scared, if I'm being honest with you, because 'cause I'm telling you, like, that was the most intense feeling that
Mm.
I felt where I was like, "Whoa," like, it was definitely going down the big roller coaster
Was it like a
feeling.
specific level? You were saying like focus 10, focus whatever. Is there one where you get there and you're like, "Oh, fuck, this is
I don't
scary."
I think what it was is that I don't even remember because it was so long ago, but I had made my way I think I had done it for maybe 3 or 4 days in a row where I sat down and I was doing each tape in a row, and then I got to the point where because 'cause I'm it's it's a miracle if I can sit down for, like, 20 minutes and meditate,
Mhm.
like, it's hard for me to sit still. I do things, I like to
Yeah.
read, I like to be thinking or writing in my journal or something. So, like, the fact that I had gotten to the point where I was sitting down with those tapes for, like, 50 minutes of straight just, like, actually zoning out and meditating, I got myself into such a empty of thought state that, it freaked me out because it
Yeah.
really started falling apart, and I was just like, "Whoa," I don't think I had the psychological architecture to handle that at that time, and maybe I do now. And now I'm thinking about maybe I should try it again. I'll
Mhm.
update you.
What's funny is, there's this has been a little bit synchronous, I guess, because like I said, I was watching that movie, I was
Mhm.
thinking about it, then one of my patrons started talking about it in the patron Discord, and he's like,
Wow.
"Yeah, I have it all, I can link it to you." I'm like, "Oh, shit.
So,
Maybe
yeah, you
maybe
should
it's
try it.
pointing maybe it's pointing." Um,
If you
I
don't get
might
freaked out when you're meditating, like, I think it's a me thing. Like, I need to get over this spooky, "Oh my god, I'm falling out of control," feeling that I can't,
Mhm.
like, let go. That's a me thing. So I'd be interested to see if, like, someone who's wired differently and can maybe, like, ease into it more, like, if how you would feel.
Yeah, I
I
would
don't
like
think
to
it's
try it.
inherently scary. I don't wanna scare anyone. If you feel like you can meditate and you don't get freaked out about these altered states, like, freaking do it, but it's just a me panic thing.
No, I on one hand, I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, it does seem like a lot of people share that
Yeah,
feeling of, like, they
that
get
makes
to
me
a
feel
certain
better.
point and they're like, "Ooh, I don't know, this is weird." And it makes
Yeah,
sense, right? Because even I don't know metaphysically what's going on, obviously. Maybe it is just
I
some
don't think a lot of people do.
brain trick or something. But, if that's what it is, if it's, like, actually separating the subtle body or something, that's not really normal. Like, that's not something that should just you shouldn't be driving a car like, "La, la, la," and then your subtle body goes
You're
flying
just
out.
watching
There's
yourself.
probably mechanisms in place to keep things like, "Oh, that's cool, I'm hovering above my car." That's not a
Yes,
good thing. Um, so that I can understand why that would be scary and why that might be jarring, especially if you suddenly have that perspective. But it's also incredibly enticing for anybody who's
yeah.
into spiritual
I
fare.
say try it, like, and then just trust yourself, like, listeners out there too, like, if you come across it, just if you feel like it's too much, like, I think the biggest part of spiritual growth is trusting yourself and not in a cheesy, like, live, laugh, love poster kind of way. Like, literally going like, "Okay, if this doesn't feel right for me right now, I'm actually gonna take a step back and then come back to it at a later time," instead of pushing yourself through things that don't feel quite right. And that's been a major lesson for me.
Yeah. This has been such a fun mind meld. Absolutely frictionless from the moment we started talking, which is
Yes.
which is a rare honestly, it's a pretty rare thing. So I
Oh,
really,
that's
really enjoyed
great.
this. Um, you're definitely welcome to come back.
I'd love to. I never
Go
get to, like, really go off on my own, like, little tangents, so this has been really fun because I do have my own podcast, but I keep it
Yeah.
pretty tight, you know what I mean? Like, so it's nice to just, like, hang out, be on a hangout
Yeah.
chat,
For sure, and it's so hard to, like, find kindred spirits that are not only into this stuff, but they have, like, genuine insights to
literally.
share, you know, and yeah, you feel I often use the phrase "wonder brother," which obviously doesn't, necessarily apply to you,
I
but
could be a wonder brother.
you're a wonder sister or
Sick. I
whatever
love that.
whatever you like, whatever you like. If you
Sick.
wanna be a wonder brother, I'll call you a wonder
I'll be a
brother.
wonder brother.
Um, alright, anything you wanna tell people about or I can tell them?
Just if you are interested in anything I've shared, obviously, I think anyone who loves Third Eye Drops would probably love Night Night Bitch, which is my podcast where I read just different esoteric articles and I break the fourth wall and make little jokes when I can't pronounce things. And people are saying that it's ASMR, which I wasn't even trying to do that, but apparently it's very calming. So go for that. You will hear a tiny little snippet of the gateway tapes in the beginning of my intro. I hope the Monroe Institute never sue me for that. Holler at them.
You're joking anyway.
Just a little snippet, guys. I'm promoting the work, and then back from the borderline too. And I think they're a nice combo of podcasts because if you want to get serious about your spiritual growth, you have to like learn about yourself and your complexes. And so I try to make my podcast like a good duo, you know? It's like the magician tarot card. Back from the borderline is the grounded one and then Night Night Bitch is the wand at the sky vibes. And I
Yeah,
share a lot of memes on Instagram, so you can join there too.
yeah. Alright, so much fun.
Thanks for
You will be
having me.
back if you
Yeah,
would
I
like
would
to be
love
back.
to.
You will be.